And for the years to come, she was placed in a variety of psychiatric hospitals, looking for the right formula to help her conquer her eating disorder and regain control on her life and happiness. At the exact same time, my brother, faced with the same challenges as I, began acting out in a different way. My Nana's health was deteriorating. Um, my mother's boyfriend had moved out, and that wing flap had suddenly created a storm. So I decided that it was my 12-year-old Isabel Cole's job to stop that storm from worsening. And it was up to me to hold our house together and to remind everyone that it was going to be okay. I promise. Right? It always ends up okay. I began taking care of my homework, soccer schedule, volunteer opportunities, and of course, visited the hospital as much as I could. For years, I teetered between extracurriculars and devoted myself to being Little Miss Perfect. I told myself that my role was to be the child that my parents wouldn't have to worry about. And they didn't, at first. But as the years passed, when I transitioned to high school, Perfect changed. Now, at every turn, I was reminded that I had to be this kind of pretty. I had to look thin. I had to be smart, carefree, as if everything else wasn't enough. I became a pretty good actor. I got all A's in school. I started on three varsity sports my freshman year. I was popular. I had a boyfriend. But what no one saw was the pain hidden behind the closed doors. I was physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted. But exhaustion was something I couldn't show. I was the friend, sister, daughter, and student that people could always count on, the one that had it all together, until I didn't. And those things that kept me going, the sports, family, and friends I loved so much, got pushed out by the sadness that crept in, enveloping my once joyous life. And the balancing act was over. I collapsed under pressure. This is what high functioning depression and anxiety looks like. And so 4 years ago, December 9th, 2016, I had enough. I was tired of waking up each day, putting on a smile, just to return home exhausted and depressed, to wake up the next morning, paint the same smile on again, and somehow continue this routine while crumbling apart on the inside. My mom, sister, and brother had already been through so much. I was just another burden. And that evening, I decided I'd rid my family of that burden. That Friday, I'll always remember, yes, because of its darkness, but moreover, because it began my very long journey of recovery. What I didn't know is that I would spend the next 9 months of my young life, the next year of my not so perfect teenage life, in hospitals. To be completely honest, it sucked. The first few months, my symptoms worsened. I blamed myself for not finishing the job. I blamed myself for putting my family through this additional pain. I blamed myself for how I was feeling, but I still claimed I don't need help. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Why was I so insistent on being okay when I was in a psychiatric hospital? Because we live in a society that cultivates comparison. We live in a society that preaches perfection, and the alternative just doesn't exist. I tried to commit suicide, but told my psychiatrist that I didn't need help because it was so ingrained in me that I needed to be okay. I'm a young woman living in this world, so I must be happy. This is the narrative we have to change. Now, what did I try and tell myself in the midst of all this pain? I tried to reason that it must be preparing me for something bigger. It has to be, because I know that everything happens for a reason. And trust me, most days this mantra doesn't stop. That mantra didn't stop my suicide ideations or deep rooted anxieties, but good moments did come. And I do have faith in something bigger because whether it's in a spiritual way or not, faith in something bigger than oneself is an incredible gift and strength to have on your side. To know that you're not alone and to know that whatever is happening in your life has a plan. And so I tried to put trust in anything bigger than me because I was saying, I'm way down here, I'm on rock bottom. There has to be some purpose to this. So, speaking of rock bottom, 6 months into insisting 6 months into saying I was okay, 6 months into this treatment, I hit my rock bottom. My friends had just finished their sophomore year of high school and they were on the beach. And here I was, this perfect popular girl sitting in the corner of a stripped room, trapped in my own chains. And this was my wake up call. I knew this was my life and no, it hadn't been easy. Yes, I've tried giving up, but that hasn't worked. I must still be here for a purpose. I needed to try something different. So I thought, okay, fine. What if I tried hope? And it wasn't a flip of a switch, um, but I did start to accept help, and that is ultimately when things began to change. I decided it was time to break free. The Netflix show 13 Reasons Why, a show based on 13 Reasons Why a young girl commits suicide, debuted during my hospitalization. I was furious. The very thing I was going through, the illness that has threatened my loved ones and my peers, was being glorified on the screen. And I've always been a fixer. I couldn't just sit there with this anger. So I used 13 Reasons Why as a catalyst for change. I took a pen and a paper and I started writing. What if we focus on 13 reasons to live? What if we focus on 13 reasons to fly and hold on to hope? There will always be things threatening to pull us down, but there are also always going to be dreams, joys, and hope. So that's what I began focusing on. I wanted to stand up for all my peers that found themselves voiceless, too scared to speak up, um, but ultimately suffering from the same stigma I was. So I began my mission to share the hope that I had found and the hope that took me months to recognize was there all along, hidden behind my diagnoses. And so as I actually began working towards my recovery, 13 Reasons to Fly grew alongside of my recovery and alongside myself. So I started spreading the campaign throughout the hospital and challenged my peers to come up with their own reasons to fly. What helps them through dark times? What keeps them going? What are their hopes and dreams? And the response I got was overwhelmingly positive. And as my confidence increased, so did theirs. 13 Reasons to Fly became my something to live for. It changed the narrative of living at a hospital. It changed the narrative of having a stripped room because I had something to look forward to and something to work for, but it wasn't in the same environment of um, stigma. It was in the environment of we all have mental illnesses here. We're all here because we're struggling and we have that basis. And so from there, we were able to grow and to love one another through our struggles and to connect each other to our reasons to fly. But we can't do that if stigma still persists. Excuse me there, there's some people being loud in the hallway. Thank you for your patience. So 2 months later, I was discharged from the hospital and signed the papers to transform the little idea that a suicidal bulimic 16-year-old had into a nonprofit organization. Now, don't be fooled. Like I said, I didn't wake up one day and suddenly want to live. My psychiatrist didn't give me this magic pill that made me better. Those 9 dark months were incredibly challenging. But I got through it because of my supports. And I got through it because people were there leading me to this help. And because once the help was there, my problems didn't go away. So those people were still there trying to hold me up. Um, I needed those supports, and I couldn't have gotten through this without them. My mantra, everything happens for a reason, has real weight now. I believe my job is to share my story so that others know it's okay to not be okay. Today, I'm a freshman at Salve Regina in Newport, Rhode Island. I plan to get my master's in social work to further 13 Reasons to Fly and advocate for young people in schools. And let me tell you, this wasn't in the script, but a little bit about my story is that while I was in the hospital for 6 months, I was in Taunton State Hospital, so close to where a lot of you may be coming from. And we took a trip to the Cliff Walk and to Newport, and we checked out one of the mansions in Newport with the hospital. And so my first time in Newport, Rhode Island that I can remember, mom, dad, if you're watching, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But my first time in Newport that I remember seeing the cliff walk, I was in the hospital. And here I am now, 4 years later, going to that college, pursuing my master's in social work. I didn't realize that until I had just read this out loud right there, but that is something worth noting. And that is something that shows that you have no idea where you might be in a few years, even if you think you have it all figured out. I'm reading my dad's message in the chat. Excuse that. Anyways, so my mantra, everything happens for a reason, has real weight now. I believe my job is to share my story, like I mentioned, because what you're going through right now, no matter how painful, no matter how confused you may be, is not the end of your story. You have purpose and your life matters. So how do we move from despair to hope? To get there, we have to push our loved ones to get help, push ourselves to get help, to keep going. Because you are worth it. Even if you don't want that help, you deserve it. And one day, I hope that everyone realizes that. So I'm going to close with an old Japanese proverb. This old Japanese proverb says that once glass is broken in a household, they pick up the pieces, dust them off, and glue them back together with golden adhesive. They fill the cracks with gold. How revolutionary is that? This has become an art form. They believe that when something suffered damage, when something has a history, tells a story, it becomes more beautiful. Now let's get one thing straight. You are certainly not broken. Hardships make us human. And you have a story, so tell it, don't hide it. Shout it from the mountaintop, mark your cracks with gold. Because your uniqueness, your quirks, your struggles are actually what makes you shine brighter. It's what makes you strong. Your cracks make you beautiful. So just like ancient bulls, you have a complex, beautiful history to tell. So go tell it. And remember, it's the cracks that allow the light to shine through. Here's to all of our precious scars. Thank you for having me. I'm going to initially unmute, but I know if we have a little bit of time, I'm here for questions. And thank you for listening.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Isabel, so much. What a beautiful testimony of your story and such wisdom for all of us. So if anybody has a question for Isabel, we have allotted some time for that. You can put it in the chat, or if you would like to raise your hand and just ask your question and talk, that's great too.
I am seeing the messages in the chat. Thank you all. I do appreciate your support. And also, I just want to say, to emphasize the fact that I don't have it all together either. I was actually having a rough morning before this, and I was thinking, how am I going to do this? You know, every presentation is great because it's an opportunity to share my story and to hear from more individuals and to share a message of mental health. But I didn't feel ready, and I felt like I was just nervous, pre-presentation jitters, of course, but also when you have anxiety and depression, things are heightened. And so to be completely transparent, I am still on my recovery journey. And so I do want to emphasize that also is that I don't have it all figured out. I know none of us do. And recovery is such a process. I just wanted to share where mine began and where I've been able to continue to work up from. So I just want to emphasize that while this journey is so worth it, it's also pretty hard. Thank you all for joining.
So wonderful. There's lots of comments thanking you for sharing your story. Your dad's comments are just putting me on the brink of tears. Mr. Cole, what a beautiful daughter you've raised inside and out. People saying that they're proud of you. We have one person that asked how they can support your nonprofit. So how can people do that?
Great question. Thank you. So while I definitely am a social worker at heart, I'm not the best businesswoman. So that's something that I definitely hope to improve upon once I graduate college and beyond. Um, but currently, we have a website called 13 Reasons to Fly, just 13 Reasons to Fly, spelled out one word. So all our social media is that as well. Feel free to follow us on there, as well as on the website. But like I said, being a businesswoman in college is challenging. So social media is definitely where we're most prominent. Sharing our message, spreading the word, and what I would prompt you all to do is to start those conversations in your family and your friends and your community, because that's what matters, because stigma will persist anywhere where conversations are not. So never have the fear that you bringing the idea of mental health and mental illness into a conversation will make someone feel a type of way, because talking about mental illness and being open and vulnerable and validating and supportive is always a positive thing. Um, and I think that that's the best way to support 13 Reasons to Fly is to stamp out the stigma in your own life, is to stamp out the stigma in your neighborhood, as well as to follow our journey as well. And of course, I'm always looking for insight, and other ways to spread our message. So feel free to shoot us an email. I'll put my Gmail in the chat as well, if anyone would like to follow up or get further contact with me.
Great. So I'd like to read some of these comments because, of course, we are recording. So for anybody who watches this later, they won't be able to see the chat. So obviously, lots of comments about how inspiring you are. An amazing story. That's a very important message around mental health. Thank you, Isabel. That you did an amazing job, very inspiring. Priceless $1 presentation. Thank you for sharing your story. You are amazing. Keep striving. Wish you the best. You are going to help so many. Thank you for sharing your story. You're incredibly strong and resilient young lady. Thank you for bringing awareness to mental health and bringing inspiration to so many others. And the website was put up here for you at 13reasonstofly.com. Thank you, Jahida, for that. So those are some of the comments that are there. So for me, just since we have a couple of minutes to chat, Belle, but many who are on here may not know that I actually am also in the mental health space. And am raising a child who has significant mental health needs over the years. And as you talked about, the journey doesn't really end, it just continues to change. And so, one of the things that I really focus on is the supporting parents. And I think that it's really can be a difficult road as a parent and can feel really isolating for parents when your kids are struggling with mental health, and there can be a lot of stigma related to that, and having these conversations or trying to identify if your kid is struggling with their mental health. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about when you were starting to feel like you were being challenged with your mental health, was that an easy conversation that you were able to have with your parents, or was it something that you were struggling with a bit before you brought it out to them? And maybe you could share a little bit about what it was like with the relationship with your parents in terms of working through mental health needs as a young adult and teenager.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Christy, for asking. Definitely a huge question, very important question. I see my dad already answered in the chat as well from a parent perspective. But what I will say is having a mental illness sometimes feels like there's something wrong with you, and that's what that's all connected with the stigma. But because that belief is ingrained in someone like me, or someone that is struggling with their self-esteem, it's really hard to bring that up to anybody. um, and I think that's why a lot of people struggle with telling their parents. However, what I would say ultimately is that, like, getting help and talking to someone just lifts an immediate weight off your chest. It's scary, and it makes you feel like, oh my goodness, now my mom knows. What is she gonna do? Is she gonna, ship me somewhere? Is she gonna be upset now? I don't want to worry her. And at the same time, now she has this huge capability to help me. And there's this bigger possibility of it's not just me struggling. Now she at least knows about it and sees it. Um, and so it definitely, the signs were there as far as struggling, and my parents were aware that I was struggling. Um, but what I will say is the best advice I could give to a parent is to show up imperfectly, completely, to show up. And even if you're scared that it might go wrong, even if you're scared that you don't know what to say, um, and this isn't just as a parent, as an adult, or as a person that cares about people, because that's what it is. Because mental illness is so prevalent that we all need to be prepared to have these conversations. And so the first thing is to just show up and to validate. You're there, lending your ear. You're there potentially as the first person this person that is struggling has disclosed this information to. So your role is important, and your role is to listen and to be there and to encourage them to continue to talk to you. And I won't give you the whole model right now, but the goal is you want to validate them. You want to show up and let them know that you're going to be there. Even you don't need to go in and ask all the questions and have all the answers, because that's overwhelming and that's a lot. But to sit outside your daughter or your son or your friend's door and to just say, when you're ready, I'm right outside this door because I want to be here when you're ready to talk, or I want to be here when you're ready to cry into my shoulder. Because even though not everybody has the best relationship with their parent or guardian, nothing is worse than dealing with it by yourself. And so I think to show up imperfectly for our loved ones is all we can do, and to continue to show up even after people stop. And so that's really the vital thing is, to show up and then connect to resources, because it's not your job to be their therapist, but it is your job to be there for them. And so that's my biggest word, and my biggest takeaway is to show up imperfectly.
I was muted. Thank you. And your dad, Mr. Cole, thank you, put into the chat, as a parent, it's such a terrible, weird feeling. It's hard to feel as lost as your child who is feeling lost. But listening to your child was the most cathartic experience, and goes to helping healing. So absolutely being there and listening. Thank you for providing that insight. And we also got a question, Isabel. What is one tip that you could give a parent to help them support their child through difficult times? So showing up and listening and just being there, would that be what you would say your biggest tip is just be open?
Yeah, that's the first spot, because that's what needs to happen first. Of course, after that, they need to get help, especially if a child revealed to you, or if anyone reveals to you that they're struggling. That means they've already thought about it for days, weeks, months, and that means that they need help. And so to listen and then to not report or connect or get help is to kind of disregard what that young person or anybody was disclosing to you. So you want to make sure that you are ensuring that they get that support. You want to make sure you're helping them make those calls, sitting next to them and saying, these are a list of people we can call. Let's do this together. And making sure that they begin that process to healing. It won't be easy, but that's what I would say first. And there have been other times, I can think a lot through my experience, where sometimes I wanted to vent to my parents, and I didn't want advice, and I just wanted to let it out. And I think allowing space for someone that's struggling to just vent is super important, and to not put your 2 cents in, and to not jump in and try and diagnose or explain or reason, but to just let that person let it out. Because there's not an answer to everything, and there's not a reason to why there's a chemical imbalance in my brain that prevents me from doing some kinds of things, um, or that makes my life harder, right? There's no way to reason sometimes, and I think just being there, um, showing up imperfectly, connecting, and not jumping to answers would be mine.
Absolutely. And there are lots of different types of supports that are out there for parents, to help kids and parents who understand. So for myself, I'm a lived experience professional. My business, Pinnacle Partnerships, is built on the basis of family-centered care related to mental health needs. And so if there's anybody here who is feeling a little lost in their care, or how to come to talking to their children, or can't find a resource and doesn't know where to start, you can absolutely connect with me. I'll put my website in the chat, so that you can connect with me. And I think for any youth that are on here that maybe don't know how to start that conversation, you can connect with Isabel, and I'm sure she'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction in your own community. But it is true. Don't feel alone, because like Isabel said from the beginning, 1 in 5 people have a mental health need. And with the pandemic, that number is actually heightened right now. So we're all in this together. This is what this is all about, community connections. And so we're here to build and learn from each other. So I want to thank you, Isabel, so much for being here today and bringing this important topic to our conference and to our day.
Thank you all.
Okay. So thank you all. Thank you, Isabel. That was wonderful. We are going to move into the next portion of our day, which is our breakout workshops, and we have lots of good ones. So the way that this is going to work is on the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a list of the breakout rooms that are available that are going to pop up. So there are several. You can pick whichever one that you would like to choose to go to. I can actually screen share as I'm talking, so you can just take a quick glance at those again. I had them up as people were coming in, but I know some people have come in after. So these are our different workshops that we are going to be presenting. So when you see this list come up, you just want to choose which workshop you want to go to, and then you'll get a pop-up and you'll be sent through the interwebs into the Zoom room that you have chosen the workshop to go into. If you have any problem with that, don't worry, just hang tight. And once people have gotten out, myself and Casey, who I had mentioned earlier, will be here, and we will make sure that you get into the right room. And we will be in our breakout rooms for just about an hour or so. And then we'll all be coming back together again just to wrap up the day and do a few giveaways. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and the breakout rooms should pop up for you.